Today I'm going to show you how to thread a serger, and specifically a Janome 1110DX, or similar is the Pro 4DX. Same sort of model, it's very common, great little serger, but if you have a different brand, the threading will be very similar to, you know, a Singer and such too. So to start off with, you're going to take off your little thread compartment. This just pulls and then drops down to open up the door. You do have a fun little threading chart here. It is a little complicated if this is your first time threading a serger, so that's why I have prepared this video for you. A little bit of information about threading the serger. You have 4 threads that operate the serger, one being your lower looper, right needle, and left needle. And thread comes on cones that are larger in size. They're on cones, not on spools, like your sewing machine, because the serger uses considerably more thread to operate. I'm going to use 4 different color threads when I teach the threading. They're going to kind of correspond with the colors up here, just so you can see the path for each. So I'm going to start with threading. And so we always start threading from right to left. So you always start with the lower looper, the upper looper next, right needle, left needle. Okay, if a thread breaks and you just rethread up your needle and the needle thread is tucked under your looper threads, your needle thread could keep breaking. And so it's a common frustration when operating a serger. And so your needle threads always have to be sort of brought up to the surface. I'll explain that when we get to the threading, but that sort of is important that you keep that in mind when threading a serger. So I'm going to start with green for our lower looper. Okay, and green is kind of color coded in this diagram as well, and there's sort of green guides as we thread, which I'll touch on. So to start, you're going to put your spool, or I guess your cone, on your spool pin here, and then you're going to put it around sort of the green thread guide. And then there's 2 little guides here, and so we're going to go back to front and then wrap it around and go back to front to feed that through the guide. Okay, and now we're going to head down to what's called our tension discs here. And I'm going to see if this can show in the video, but when you thread, you want to make sure your foot is down. And what I mean by that is you're lowering your foot, because when you do that, these discs squeeze together. And so when I lift up my foot, you might see them open, there you go, and then when I put it down, they squeeze tighter. And so when they're closed, your thread will actually wiggle right in between those discs, which is what we want. So we're going to grab our thread, and I kind of hold it at top and bottom like this, and I push it right into those discs, and you'll hear that sort of noise of the thread going in between. That's what we want. If you go with them up and they don't squeeze in, you won't have proper tension with your serging, which is not a desirable, obviously, outcome. We're going to come straight on down and just through our little thread guide here. It's just like a little groove from right into left. And now we're going to look for our green sort of dots. So our first dot, and it shows in this diagram, says to come from here and go across into our first guide. So again, it's like a little C, and I go back to front in it, and it just clicks in to that little circle. Okay, and there's a little green, it's sort of worn off on my machine, but this is a little green guide down here, and again it's pointing to it on our machine. And so we're going to feed it through this little circle. Okay, and then we're going to come and feed it through this little green guide as well. I'll show you close up in just a second. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone through my C, I've gone through my first guide, through my second guide from top to bottom, and now it shows in there coming up and across, and you're wondering, oh my gosh, do I feed that through this side because this door opens with tweezers, or how am I going to get that? No, there's a little lever. So when I push on my little lever here, you will see that when it's up, it fires this little C hook out to help me feed it through, and also allows one more guide to appear. And I'm going to do that again. So if your little dial is down, these are hiding and you won't be able to thread your serger properly. So you just take this and you push up, and that next guide and the hook appear. And so you want to get a pair of tweezers. Honestly, I use them all the time for threading. It makes your life a lot easier. So I hook my thread and I just go underneath and up. And again, I'm trying to zoom in so you can see this, but I did just hook it from underneath here, and it just clicks in. And then I'm going to grab my thread again with my tweezers, and I'm just going to loop it around that little hook like that. Okay. And once that's done, now I can turn my hand wheel, you know, so that my needle is going to come out above my upper thread needle. So it's just like right here, so that now I can thread the eye of the needle. And again, tweezers make your life easier to pull that through. And so now my thread's coming out my lower looper needle. Okay, and our diagram looks exactly like this. Okay, our next thread is going to be red. That will represent our upper looper. So we'll put our cone on our spool. Again, loop it around our thread guide, and then come back down and go back to front, around that guide. And being very careful to get the thread into the tension disc. So I'm going to again hold it taut, and I'm going to push it into the discs. My foot is down, so those tension discs are squeezed together to grab that thread. And now I'm going to go into that little groove. And now we're looking for pink dots, just like again our diagram shows. The lower looper that we did in green is our hardest one to thread. So we're on a little bit of an easier path now. So I'm going to hook it into our C little guide here. And then it goes straight down, and it goes down and up to hook it into the next pink. And then it's going to just go straight up, and you can see in our guide from our lower hook, it's going to hook between this little guide. And so I'm just going to turn my hand wheel so that green is out of the way. So I'll just grab my tweezer for a second. It just got hooked on there. There we go. Beautiful. So you're going to hook it into this little bar. It holds the thread close to the needle. And now we're going to thread our upper looper needle. And again, tweezers make life very easy to grab the tip and pull it towards the back. Okay, so that was quite simplistic, I think, for the next thread. And so now we're going to be moving on to the needles. So you can close up this bottom now. So you just lift it and it kind of just slides back in, right? Because you pull it away and it drops, and then you can push it in and it goes back together. So we're going to grab blue. Blue represents our right needle. And so we're going to put that on our spool here and loop it around the blue guides and around back to front, back to front. Okay, and now we've got that tension disc again. So squeeze in that thread into that disc, and now we have two blue dots. So it's just going to hook under this little guide here. And now we're going to go underneath this groove here, okay? And we're going underneath, and it's going to hook above. So my thread is above sort of our take-up lever up there, okay, because that's where that blue dot shows. So I went around and up over, and now I'm going into my little needle guide more on the right hand side, because this one right here will be for yellow for my left needle. And now into my thread guide. Again, this guide just keeps the thread close to your needle, takes the tension off of it. And if I turn my hand wheel towards me to raise my needles up, I'm going to thread my right needle. So if this becomes in the way, you could keep that down to thread. I'm just going to clip a fresh little tip to make it easier. And we're going to thread up that needle. And so once we've threaded up this needle, you'll grab the end and pull it through with your tweezers. Okay, last thread. That will be our left needle. It's our yellow guide. That's why I'm using a yellow thread. And so we're going to put our last spool, hook it around the top. Very kind of repetitive in the steps on all our serger threads at the beginning, going through the same guides, and then coming down and grabbing the top and the bottom of the thread and making sure it goes in our tension. So similar to blue, we're going around this groove behind. So can you see that yellow thread? I'm going down and up, and then on top of my take-up lever there, and now into the first guide around my needle bar there, okay, and now through my needle. And if it's harder, sorry, to pull your thread like that, you can lift your needle because this has tension, right? That's what we wanted to thread it initially, but if you needed to pull some slack, you can lift your foot and it will be easier to pull. So now we have our needle threaded. I grab my tweezers, make sure it's not hooking on anything, and we are in action. So I will tuck all my threads sort of underneath my foot and out the back to start, and make sure my foot is down. Now I'll close that back up. And some general guidelines to keep your machine on the correct tensions is they should be about 4s going across, okay? And I'll explain balance tension in a second when I do a little sample and you can see the different thread colors. My stitch length is at 3. My differential feed is at 1, okay? So I'm going to grab a sample here and we're going to test out the serge so I can explain what each part just did. Okay, if you've never used a serger before, there is a little blade. It's behind the foot right there. You can't cut yourself on it because the foot covers it, but anything past this edge will cut off. And so sometimes that's a good thing if we're wanting to bulk reduce or get rid of some jagged cutting. But when you're a beginner, cutting off extra material is not a good thing, because by accident you might cut off a large piece of, just say, your seam, and now the project might not fit you. So if you are a beginner, get used to just following this edge with the edge of your fabric, with the edge here, and my foot is down and I'm going to push my fabric right up to the foot. And now all I'm going to do here is press my foot pedal to get it to go, and it will naturally grab my fabric, okay? And so as we start here, I'm just going to put my threads through at the top here. They were just getting a little, there we go, tied up. So I'm just going to speed it through here. on a serger you can chain off, and what that means is you can just go right off the serger and it forms a chain of threads without fabric there, and that's what you want to do so that you don't let it come unthreaded next time you sew or serge. So I just wanted to explain my stitch here. I have my left needle, which is yellow. I have my right needle, which is blue. There's my upper looper on the top, and on the back side I have my lower looper, which was green. Okay, and when you have balanced tension, red and green should meet right along that top edge. Okay, one shouldn't pull over to the other side. And so that's sort of the serger in a nutshell on each thread and how to thread them. Please watch my video on how to do the quick threading method. If you already have your machine threaded, then you want to change the color. It's way quicker than starting from scratch.